Okay, I'm going to call this Plan Commission meeting for October 8th to order. Roll call. Kevin, you doing that?
Chris Zellner.
Here.
Sue Springman.
Here.
Joel Zitzelberger.
Here.
Brad Zeman.
Here.
Brian Mullick.
Here.
Tim Black.
Here.
Chris Thomas.
Okay, first thing on the agenda is minutes. Does anybody like it, something changed, or is there any problems, or I'd look for a motion?
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion by Brad Zeman, second by Chris Thomas. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Public comment. Is there anyone here that would like to address the commission on anything that's not on the agenda this evening? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. New business, discussion recommendation on proposed annexation of school district property and the Miller property. Kevin?
Yeah, you've seen this before, but now is the point where you'd be actually making a recommendation onto the village board in terms of the annexation of the school property, the Muller property, and then there's some miscellaneous right-of-way that our police department wanted to have some jurisdiction involved with. I'd put the map up, but my computer's locked out. So it's on page 7 of the packet. If there's any questions, I'll try and answer them, but in essence, we're bringing in the school district property, which is on Woodland Drive, I guess west of Q, but we're also bringing in the school property that has the soccer fields, Simon Crestway, and the baseball fields. And as noted before, Endress Manufacturing will continue to be in the town. They don't have any desire to annex in the village. We don't not have the right to annex in without their approval.
Go ahead.
Does this create an island that creates a problem if they're the only thing left?
No, because we have a boundary agreement with town of Westport, islands are not a problem for us.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Last time when a couple months ago, we're looking at this, we were talking about that section of Highway 19 where Schumacher is, and
Yeah,
where does that sit relative?
Yep.
I mean, obviously this is cut out of that, but.
right, and we're pursuing it. It's a little more complicated, so Brian and Tracy have been working with the DOT officials to make that happen, but it's not as straightforward in terms of, because we're not annexing anybody's land. All we're annexing is road right-of-way, so we have to actually go back and research on who is the land deeded to initially to see if we have to do anything else with it. I know we're still pursuing that.
I know that our police chief fully supports this.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a safety perspective, it makes just a ton of sense,
Absolutely.
especially those athletic fields and, yeah.
So, look for are we looking for a motion on this one, Kevin?
Yeah, it's just a motion to
Recommendation.
recommend approval to the village board.
Okay,
So moved.
motion by Susan Springman.
Second.
Is that you, Joe? Yeah. Second by Joe Zitzelberger. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we've got discussion of preserving the character of downtown Waunakee. Kevin?
Yeah, Chris, and maybe you want to talk about this too, but this just really came out of discussion between you at one of your listening sessions, and so we added this to the Plan Commission to really, not really to take any action tonight. Certainly, you're not in a position to probably take any action tonight. Is there an interest in pursuing some of these concepts and establishing historical preservation of our downtown? And there's many different ways to go about doing that, and we'd have to engage our planners and attorney in order to do some of these things. I didn't want to take any steps until we had some buy-in from the Plan Commission, if that's something you want to pursue. Right now, we really rely on our central business district, and many of the buildings in our downtown are based on the recommendations in this report, but this was done in 2003. So, the Hubdy project on both sides of the road, some of the redevelopment of the furniture store and the signage and the lighting and what's acceptable, trying to find that certain era. That's different, that's maybe different than a historical district, but this is what we've been using in terms of guidelines and in terms of preserving the character of our downtown. So with that, I'm looking for feedback. It looks like we got a number of people here tonight that may have some interest in this as well.
Can you define what a downtown historical district is?
I'm not the right person to ask for that. I
Okay,
think that's
fair enough.
something, I think if Tracy's tried to give you some background that she found in other communities.
Right.
There's fewer historic districts because they can become problematic in terms of how restrictive they are in terms of redevelopment. I think they found that in the city of Madison, in other communities. So I think communities in general have shied away from creating historical districts and then going with more of a historical committee rather than a commission and setting up guidelines as opposed to going through the process. But I don't have enough experience in it to really give you more background than that.
We have a lot of education that we'd have to do before we decide, because there's a local and there's a national. And then there's individual properties that could be landmarked. And if, some of them that get landmarked could get tax credits. But it can affect people next door if you're landmarked and others aren't, and it can affect what you're able to do. And you have to have really extensive guidelines. It take our planner or somebody who's gonna have to draft a lot of documents. So I think we're gonna need to go through in great detail what all of it means, and then what area you're talking about. I mean, are you talking about all Main Street? Is there any part of Q you're talking, where exactly? So there's a lot of research to be done. And, you know, do we have any national historic?
One, for
One,
sure.
we have the one house, but do we have anything else?
I think the depot is.
The depot?
That's what Wikipedia knows.
Yeah, I think the depot is too.
That may or may not, because that was actually, we moved that there, like, just in the late 90s, early 2000. It's actually moved from a different part of the, it's always a flashback in the Tribune when they see the train was moved over up to front of the,
So I'm in favor of creating something at this point down, to keep our historical nature and charm of our downtown. I'm completely in favor of that. I am not in favor of putting us in a restrictive situation based on others, that if somebody wants to put a new door on their home and they have one of these homes, and all of a sudden it's a $20,000 door because it has to fit a certain standard, that they would be required to do that before they could even do it. I don't want anything like that to happen.
Can't replace your
per residence.
windows either.
Or your windows, or whatever it might be. So I don't want it to be restrictive in that nature. So I think that's what you're kind of going at with creating
I'm not really
more of a
recommending,
committee as
yeah, I
opposed
think
to a
that's
commission,
right. That-
is what you're kind of going at with that.
I think we could give you an array of options, you know, with working with our planners and maybe the village attorney and talking to other communities, before we even take that next step. Here's the options that you can pursue. Here's the level of effort it's gonna take to, pursue with any one of these options.
So as I said, I'm completely for preserving the character of our downtown, not changing Waunakee, so to speak. But having a very, specific creation of something that's gonna,
We want to inventory
Not make it too
everything,
restrictive.
too.
and how do we go about that process of designating?
It
You know,
costs
who's
money,
designated?
someone's gotta do
Who's not designated? Is it a whole area? And obviously, there's people here that are interested in this topic. I'm assuming it's for this topic and maybe not the last one. So I would like to get some of your feedbacks too, as far as what you would like. So if everybody's okay on the commission with that?
Yep.
I don't have to open it up, but I'm choosing to do
But
that.
you also didn't mention updating relative to design guidelines, and so, we don't have we don't have what's called an urban design commission or a design committee, or we just rely on,
Planning Commission, you are in
We are.
terms of, yeah.
and we are not necessarily qualified
Correct.
relative to that. So there's also that step of looking at in highly prominent places, just some design guidelines that would also fit the character, that you might want to achieve, so.
And as Kevin said, at listening sessions, but also other times, people have asked me about having some sort of thing, and I've asked staff to put together some information for us, but I want to hear from people what they want to see from this, what they want it to be for specifically in the downtown is where we're probably looking at, is my guess. So, if anybody would like to speak, please provide info.
I think we were specifically asking for a committee, not to have a district designated. To have a committee to look at what we have in the village. I don't think anybody really asked to have a district designated in any of the meetings we were in.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'm just more interested in having the guidelines and stuff.
Actually, I'm sorry. First was,
Oh, sorry, Mary Heimbecker,
For the camera's
306
purposes.
West Third Street.
thank
I
you.
apologize.
Nope, it's fine.
Carrie Arneson, 923 Lexington Way. I'm more interested in just having something written in terms of guidelines. I have a property on Main Street. I'd like all the houses there to maintain some level of being preserved and being held to actually some sort of standard, to make our downtown look nice.
Okay.
Maria Pat, 1000 Wexford Drive. The question that keeps coming back to my mind, and it's actually a question that was partially answered at the last open house, is an actual definition of what the downtown area
Right.
is. What are the boundaries? And in looking at some of the materials that were prepared for tonight's meeting, made me think to myself, are we kind of coming at this a little too late? Since parts of Main Street have already been changed, looking okay, is it worth it to do something where people might say, oh, now we have to retrofit and do something different? That could become an issue for some of the owners, especially for some of the larger buildings that are there. I liked, the one report that I spent the most time with was the one for Elm Grove, and it looked like it had a downtown area that was sort of similar to ours, in that it had a main street, and then it had some transitional, and it had transitional housing, and it had people living there in single-family residences. That's the one that I just glanced at quickly that looked sort of like our downtown area. But I think just having a clear idea of what is our downtown area, what's our boundary, and what are we talking about, and what kinds of things can we do to have some of those more, people have used charm, I'm not sure I would use that, but to keep some sort of kind of similarity, or make something similar. Is that good enough just with the street lighting that's put up? Because that certainly has been done. You know, some of those things have already been done to make the Main Street look a little bit more small-town Main Street. And so I don't know if it's necessary to have a commission. I don't know that we need a lot of ordinance changes, but I've certainly heard at meetings that people are interested in maintaining a certain quality that's very hard to even define. So,
Okay. Sorry, I got it on my note. Anyone else?
Yes, Chris. Kathy Carney. My husband and I own property on Main Street as well, the 200 block of Main Street. And I think we probably would be interested in just a little better idea of what the vision is for the downtown area. And I think I would be more in favor of guidelines or committees than putting something that would be really restrictive in place. And I think that even as you go down Main Street, each block might look a little bit different. You know, I think they have different buildings on them right now, and what might be right for one block may not be right for another block or different block down the way. So I'd be really concerned if we got to be too prescriptive in terms of what we think does or doesn't belong along Main Street, but I think some sort of a guideline or vision or way of dealing with maybe something that isn't articulated in the comprehensive plan specifically. I think the zoning is good with the C1D. I think that starts to put some parameters in place in terms of what we think we want on Main Street. But so I think I wouldn't want to get too prescriptive and tie people's hands, because who knows what we might want to do in 5-10 years from now with some of the properties that are there.
Anyone else? Keep down or forever hold your peace. Don't put that in the paper, please. Edit that one out. Was in jest, okay. So, all right, so I've got quite a few notes that I just took down for this. I guess I'll look for some of your comments too, as well as the residents. Brad, do you have any?
Good discussion points. Hate to see us be too restrictive. Got friends who have got developments downtown Madison in the historic district, and Sue, as you probably know, can be very painstakingly troubling and financially burdened with historic district. We have these guidelines now, and I think neighbors really need to keep each other accountable in this situation. I really would hate for the village to spend a lot of money on a big study and put all this work and effort into a report if we don't have to. And, you know, we gotta just look out for each other as neighbors and keep the communication going, and maybe there's a subgroup of downtowners that wanna put together a neighborhood association. They can work amongst each other and kind of commingle that way.
Okay. Chris, any comments?
I feel the same way. I do like all the discussion points brought up tonight. One of the first things I always think of whenever someone says downtown Waunakee is, where does it start? Is it Division and Main? Does it go all the way down Q? I don't know. I don't know how to define downtown Waunakee either. So I would like some discussion around that, just to narrow that in.
Okay. Joe?
I gotta go along with what Chris said, is, you know, one of the first places we have to start is defining what we're working with. You know, we didn't get to where we're at overnight. It's been a process over many, many years, and, you know, there's been a lot of change over that time. So I don't think that there's one solution that will fit everything, but we do need to know what we're working with.
Okay.
You know, we did this study in 2003, and I'm sure that not everybody's read it, and I keep forgetting about it myself, and I was around then. I think as I look through this, I'm reminded about the extensiveness of this study, everything that was in it relative to our Main Street, and talked about parking, it talked about design guidelines, signage, all those things. I almost think we might start by reviewing this document that already exists, look at where we are, and look at what we might change in this document. And as part of that, you know, there is a historic commercial core. There could be a question to the community as to whether or not they want to include the neighborhood surrounding Main Street, you know, the older homes around the school. Is that something they'd like to look at some point? Is some of the issue maintenance of properties? Are we making sure that people are properly maintaining their properties? Do people understand what sorts of financial resources are out there to utilize those? You know, kind of look at it from that vantage point and start with that first before, you know, and if we wanted to go further, we could. But it would be a good beginning because we already have this, but it's out of date.
Okay. Tim?
Did you say Tim?
I said.
Gotcha. I didn't hear. I heard T. Yeah, doesn't want to hear what you have to say. Listen, I mean, I think, you know, defining what we're talking about is a great point, right? Because, you know, does downtown run from Division to Holiday? I don't know. I think we'd probably all come up with 6 different answers on what downtown really was, and is it just Main Street, or is it the blocks north and south of there? I do think that some sort of a committee to help define what that is, and then what we're looking for, may make some sense, to put a little bit of focus and strategy around what it is, because I think you hear kind of, at least from, you know, the citizens' perspective, a couple different things. Maintenance, defining what the scope is, what the area is, what the look is, what the feel is. So I think just defining probably makes some great sense.
Okay. Brian?
Kind of go back actually to that same, the 03 report. Admittedly, I have not read the entire thing, but spent a pretty good time scrolling through it. And while I don't know that necessarily has design guidelines, there's even some nice references in there that kind of cherry pick a handful of buildings along Main Street. And it's like, hey, this appears to sort of reflect this architectural style. It could be cleaned up by changing this, changing that, you know, some different elevation adjustments that it seems to give it maybe some recommendations versus guidelines. But I do like kind of the meat of that report, and I think maybe a little bit of updating, spending a little bit of time in there. and kind of using that. I think it could be a great guideline for a committee or someone to look into this, because I do have an interest. I agree, I don't really like the idea of a real restricted district either. So I think more of a committee, some guidelines, recommendations would be in order.
Okay, so there's some pretty good feedback for you as far as what we're looking to do. At our listening session, I gave kind of what my vision was for the downtown, and where I viewed the downtown. And really, you have your historical portion of downtown, but I think it goes all the way from Division, really to the roundabout is where I considered our downtown. And if you look at where things are potentially out into the future, going off to the west, we're gonna run into an area that's protected. So if you get to the veterinarian clinic, the old veterinarian clinic, and Mr. Brahaska's house, beyond that, there's nothing that's gonna be developed in there. That's just a corridor that's gonna be stopped. Going off to the east, as we leave the village right now, at some point, that could become part of the downtown district. And I think of, a village is different than a city, and a village is more quaint than a city, in my opinion. And so when I hear Madison, I just kind of zone out away from that, frankly, and don't think of Madison. But I do think that every community has its different parts, and the historical part of our community, as far as I'm concerned, since 1969, that I can go back, is really right around the railroad and going off a couple blocks from that. That's our historical part of the community. And outside of that, that's gonna be part of the downtown district, still, moving farther, but not the historical necessarily.
When you say that, are you specifically talking about Main Street, your vision, or a couple blocks either side?
Main Street
Okay.
is where I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Now, if we wanna go to the housing side of it, coming off the street and make that as part of the historical port, we could look at that. And those are our homes that have been here. I think Marilyn Kearney gave everybody here the original map and plat.
Right.
That was there, and we could maybe use that as a basis. But I agree that the Central Business District Master Plan, which most people probably haven't had the opportunity to look at out here, I'm assuming? Or have you had an opportunity, some of you? Okay. Okay, so that's a good guide for us to start. Forming a committee from this, Kevin, I think that would be appropriate for you to come back with some recommendations on how to form a committee. I think it would be good to include no more than 7 people into the committee, and maybe have 2 people from this committee be part of that, or its commission, I should say, and the majority of it downtown residents, and maybe throw 1 person from outside of the downtown. That should be in there.
There's some business people who are on the street.
Yeah,
Yeah, they should be on it.
Mm-hmm.
but I think a group of 7 would be a good starting point, but you can make recommendations on that. Maybe it's 9, I don't know, whatever we want it to be. And we're studying our housing right now, of course, and this is very much focused to a specific area of the community. But I think it's the core and the true nature of Waunakee really fits down there, and I don't wanna belittle that in any way. So. Based on, what your feedback is, Kevin, I guess that's what I would recommend, is that you come back to us with a
Okay.
suggestion on how we can go about this. Look at the other communities, what they're doing, based on what you've provided us already, and something that would be appropriate
Okay, will do.
for moving forward. Is everybody good with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Everybody out there, any comments, okay, sounds good then? How we're gonna go about that? Okay, perfect. All right. No action for Waunakee Westport, so we have one more motion.
Move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Joe.
Second.
Chris got it first, I think, so I'm gonna give a second to Chris. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank
I
you.
am going to.